There you go. Episode 2. What?
Nothing. It set up a thing. A pop-up came up with some weird disclosure about Zoom. I just clicked, got it. So it might be.
We're constantly given permission to things that we really don't understand.
Yeah, and I'm one of the ones who really just dives headfirst into that. Got it. No problem. Whatever you say, boss. All right, here we are, episode 2.
Episode 2. Yeah.
Neurotic terrain.
Neurotic terrain. There is so much of it.
Talking about it. Go ahead.
Being inhuman and talking about it, I named the first episode that because it seemed like that's a pretty great title, and it's going to be our what we call tagline, right?
That's
Are we going to say that every time now? Being
inhuman
and talking about it?
Count off, or do you have the technology to put our voices over one another so it sounds like we're saying it in unison? Or does
yeah, could be, but maybe we should just sort of have the old-fashioned, do it each time slightly differently, somewhat chaotic, out of sync, because we're not sitting in the same room together.
That's right.
And that kind of naturalness, I think, is more inviting, perhaps. You know, I like the relaxed, not a real high professional polish on things. It seems like that kind of turns me off immediately. If I see something that's really well produced, my tendency is to feel that it's not legitimate. I'll still listen to some of them, but
totally.
Yeah.
Yep. It's also true with the popularity. I would never join a club that would have me as a member, sort of.
Groucho Marx.
Yeah. So what if we divvied it up? One of us says being human, and the other one says and talking about it.
Ooh, I like that.
Right? So you go first.
Welcome to the second episode of Neurotic Terrain, being human
and talking about it.
Now that sounded kind of professional, didn't it?
Yeah, it did. I really put a little bit of shellac on that.
Have you ever worked with some of the guys who do voiceover for a living?
I haven't. I've been, I tried a voiceover for a commercial jingle job. Tried submitting one of my tracks with the voiceover, and there was no comment made. I'm not sure what that.
You know what they call it when they're doing that. And that kind of like the advertising voice.
Sure.
They call it puking.
Yeah. So I just Ralphed a little bit. Sorry to Ralph on our second session.
No, I was doing it too.
All right.
Do we have a topic?
Your name is up there, Noah W.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, good. All right.
I guess I could change it to, whatever. Who cares?
Yeah. Well, we got so many topics, my lord. Yeah, man, so many things came up last time. I think actually, well, I mean, I have psychobabbly topics. Like I often use myself and my own experience to, not often, it's pretty much all the time. I'll use my own neurotic experience or difficulties mentally and emotionally to kind of, a fringe benefit of that suffering is that I'll often kind of figure out things about the people I'm working with, or it's symbiotic. They'll help me figure out things about myself, and kind of confronting my own difficulties then will sort of hit me to, no way, that's what's happening with so-and-so in a different way. And very, very interesting realizations this week. So that's one option. The other one is sort of gratitude for things that are still good in this country during a difficult time.
Yeah, I'm kind of intrigued by the first topic, but the second topic is something that I'm struggling with myself. I've been following things very closely, and I am extremely concerned about where things go next. Mm-hmm. So, I don't know. I feel like in some respects, it might be more pleasant to focus on the first topic.
Yeah, man. Well, we can The thing about the first topic is that it goes into a lot of, well, it kind of connects to the realm of narcissism, right? Like, you know, um, so the idea being that narcissism is like a gallbladder or a pancreas. I think I might have said this last time, right? Or like any organ within us, it is supposed to be there, right? It's the name the word's got a funky feeling to it, as and especially like a bit of a pejorative connotation to it these days, or a negative connotation rather. So like, but the idea is it's a very healthy organ. It's got to be there, right? It, what happens for so many of us is that it gets bonked, zapped, or tweaked in the wrong direction. Either, you know, too much of being somebody's little champion, a caregiver's little champion, and too much of a reflection of our specialness or importance. That sets us up for some suffering later in life. You'd think it wouldn't, but it really does. And the other side, which is arguably worse, I guess, but maybe it was pretty bad too, or about the same. And where there's some kind of deficit in something and it wounds that organ. And if we're carrying around what I refer to as a narcissistic wound, we're forever compensating for it. I'll shut up in a sec, but just dig this. The typical way that I think about that, or that is, I've learned from other theorists to think about that, is the compensatory stuff that will occur to sort of fill the void, right? So there is a sense of inner impoverishment and emptiness, almost like the tank that would hold the fuel that is a sense of being worthy, lovable, and good has no bottom. It's not a bucket that holds love and a sense of worthiness. It's a tube. And so you only feel good reflection from the outside world while it's going through the tube, but it wears off very quickly. And then you're empty and impoverished again. So you're sort of forever seeking to charm, to advertise, to be essential, to in some way impress, please, or earn love or attention from others. And that's the typical compensatory narcissism. In its worst forms, it's the classic, like, person who seems very outwardly arrogant, full of themselves, you know. But there's a kind of more subtle thing I realized this past weekend when I woke up feeling very bad about myself and my life and my relationship. And I realized that for a lot of us who carry a wound like that, it isn't just that we're trying to combat feeling empty inside, it's that we're trying to feel safe. And when the fuel isn't coming through the tube, we don't just feel lame, we feel unsafe, especially in a given relationship. And that was an interesting distinction for me.
Yeah, I think Vaknin talks about this in terms of the difference between like a healthy narcissism and a malignant narcissism, and he refers to the kind of need for this thing to keep coming through the tube to compensate for the sense of inadequacy. He calls that narcissistic supply.
Wow.
And
Yeah.
it seems to me that the core of the issue is the extent to which the thing which one desires is actually of any value.
Attaboy. That's why I pay the
So
big bucks. Yep. Mhm.
uh, it occurred to me as someone who was, we were both brothers in the world of competing to try to enter the rock star domain.
Yeah.
And so of course that's a place that's basically all about narcissism. The thing that frustrated me quite a bit was that I thought that the whole point of it was music, but then it took a little while for me to realize that no, actually the whole point of it is narcissistic supply. And so,
Mm.
in a way that I think provides a pretty good model because the average, nowadays when someone says the word musician, people kind of automatically think, oh, someone who wants to be a rock star,
Hmm.
basically, right?
Hmm.
Or a pop star, or whatever. I know rock is out of style now, right? Or maybe it's coming back. I can't tell. Um,
Lord knows.
but in the past, musician was someone who was interested in music, who would
Hmm.
who would develop their skills in music.
Right.
And I think in some ways that's really the basic question. Like the question as to whether or not I'm acceptable to others can never be answered. Whether or not I am genuinely being approved of by others. Because here's the great irony, and maybe another reason why this is such an interesting example. The great irony of being a rock star is that if you're successful,
Hmm.
you will never know whether the people who say they love you actually do.
Hmm. Totally.
You won't be able to trust anyone.
It's hard to imagine, isn't it? Like what that must be like. Not trusting people is pretty easy to imagine, unfortunately.
I think
But
that's trickled down to the rest of society.
right. May I say one thing about what you said earlier? I think I think I think being lovers of music, we can both agree that uh or I think, but like even though I think it's a little bit of both. A lot of people jonesing for narcissistic fuel, and that
The
is
the internet
perhaps
just glitched for a second, so could you just go back one bit?
oh, sure, sure.
Yeah.
I think it's like a combo, and we should be fair. And please correct me if you disagree, but like that, even in the most virulent form of somebody just doing it to get the fuel, not just about music, right? Even in the most virulent form of that, there have been some great things produced that are really awesome to listen to. Like we can
Oh
we
yeah.
can we can say that, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Right? And no matter what inner impoverishment they're compensating for, in some ways, selfishly, we could say, well, it must be really rough to be you, and that stuff's out of the tube, and you're putting something in your veins to make up for it when the show's over. But I really like that record. That sounds effing great. But on
Yeah.
the other hand, I do think that there's a lot of people out there doing it for the music too. And that it's a combo, it's a lot about the music, but
Yeah.
it,
I think, you know, it's an oversimplification, but it kind of points to the dynamics at play, right?
yeah,
And
yeah,
so there's a mix involved, and obviously there are some who are more interested in music than others. There's a lot of people who basically just take stuff off the shelf that's been done a million times and
right,
try to, reimagine it one way or another.
yeah,
So
yeah,
when you think about the people who have really gotten hardcore into developing musical understanding, even the best of the popular music seems relatively undeveloped. You know what I mean?
hmm,
But that doesn't mean it's not incredibly effective, evocative, emotionally resounding.
right,
It's not
yep.
really a criticism of it. It's just an observation on how wide the spectrum is.
Oh,
You
it's
know.
so true. Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, what was I just thinking? I completely forgot what I was just thinking.
Oh, I got a good question here. So, have you ever had the experience as a musical person, and you and I, we've been in some bands together where, you know, where you kind of thought that you sucked on stage or in a recording, right? Although the recording thing is a whole other can of worms. But let's just say on stage, you think you botched it pretty bad, or that the material you were presenting was just not well received. People were talking, distracted, drinking drinks, whatever. And then you get off stage and you can really tell that there is a certain authenticity to people's response when they really liked something you did musically and performed. You can tell when they're faking, right? And you can tell when it's canned, and you can tell when there's genuine enthusiasm in their voice and they were obviously affected. Have you ever thought you really did terribly up there, and then you get off stage and you can tell that your perception of your performance was totally off?
Oh yeah. Yeah,
right?
totally.
And
Uh,
what did that feel like when you got the goods from the person in the audience and you what did it feel like? Was it incredibly soothing, a relief, or did you get kind of high on it?
I think that, it's confusing. And so it kind of brings your own perception into question. And I think that ultimately what it's resulted in is that uh, you really never know exactly what it is that you're doing. You never really know the impact that it's having. I think that
Hmm.
this plays into essentially all aspects of human activity. Regardless of what it is that you're doing, you don't really fundamentally know the consequences of it, and you don't really know the significance of it to others, right? And so I've just kind of defaulted to this very simple kind of uh, childlike attitude of, well, I'm just going to do the best I can. Like it's really that
Huh.
simple,
Yeah.
and try not to worry about that. I mean, there are moments where you get confronted with something where uh, you realize that you said something that was the wrong thing, you really upset someone, you made the wrong move, there's all kinds of things that can happen where you're hit by this sense of inadequacy, right?
Yeah.
And the tendency from that point on, for those of us who struggle internally, those of us who are in the neurotic terrain bucket,
Hmm.
is to continue the process of beating ourselves up,
Yo
to
yo.
intensify it, and
Totally.
to see how that reflects on all aspects of our character until we're
My
reduced to
yep.
essentially nothing.
Yep.
And so I think that the important thing is to just simply acknowledge the facts of the situation, which is that everyone screws up sometimes, and the only thing you can do is get back on the bike and do the best you can, and to not extrapolate to every other aspect of your life. Or,
Hmm.
God forbid that you just start to see all human beings as being fundamentally flawed and evil, which, you could make a pretty good case about.
Yeah. Well, and we're all like, we all it's true. It's like, I guess another question is how there are folks, I'm pretty sure out there, and I'm not saying they're normies or boring, and I'm not saying, oh, I envy you because your life is so simple and I'm I'm smart and neurotic. Like that's rubbish. What I am saying is I'm pretty sure there are people out there who don't who don't have sort of a potential jumbotron of negative judgments of and appraisals of themselves going through their head that they
Yeah.
not just daily but hourly, minutely, if that's a word, have to combat with something else, right? And you
Well,
get
I
into
think,
this.
obviously, we are a species that has an incredible diversity of experience. And I think that there are still people who are raised in families that are intact, that have long-standing relations, a sense of kind of solidity of purpose, and not that kind of modern or maybe postmodern chaotic quality to them. And I think that, you and I were raised in families which broke up, and which consequently, or maybe sort of adjacently, in addition to the already existing chaos, there was then the chaos of the family breaking up.
Mhm.
And that's a completely different environment. It's basically like the difference between a seed that's planted in a favorable environment versus one that's kind of an unfavorable environment, and all the difficulties that happen as a result of that. So it's just that simple in many respects. I think those of us, even though we were told that we were very lucky because we had, you know, families that made enough money so that they could buy all the stuff that leads to
Sure.
the, illusion of the
Yep.
consumer paradise, right?
Yeah.
So we were told that we were lucky, but in reality, the actual circumstances of our lives were one of profound difficulty and unhappiness quite often.
Yeah, man. Well put. That's so sad, isn't it?
Oh, it's heartbreaking, but it's also kind of a, well, let's put it this way. Everywhere you look in nature, the same thing is happening.
Yeah.
Like you go out into the forest and some trees have just this beautiful spot, and they're just really beautifully established, and they're symmetrical, and they're just like in their glory. And then you go
Hmm.
to a more dense area and it's just like everything is fighting for what little thing they can get, and some of them have almost no opportunity. You see a lot of little seedlings that only make it about this big, and then
Yeah.
they're done.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's just that's nature. Like it's the way it is. Not everyone gets the best hand, you know,
Mm.
and that
You know
brings into
what's go
yeah.
ahead.
Go
You
ahead.
no, you first. You first. I'll remember. This is a good one. Yeah.
Actually, I think this was the thing that I was sort of thinking about before.
Where did it
You know,
go?
it brings into question this one of the presumptions of Western society, which is that all men are created equal, all people are created equal. I mean, on a certain level, it's just most obviously not true.
It's
You
just not
know,
true, man. Yeah.
it's just not true.
No. No.
You could say
I
equal
think
in the eyes of God.
okay, sure.
You
I mean,
know,
I think that the idea is you get, from one perspective, I think there's like a fairness thing that we're all sort of thinking about, where we're like, okay, well, if I had a rough go of it this time, next time around, if you believe in that kind of thing, I'll be a prince, or uh,
when you think
but
of the
I just
relative number of princes versus the number of people who
it's
are
not
hoping next
looking good,
time to
is
be
it,
the
man?
princes, like,
Yeah. But then again, there's the whole trip. I mean, what's funny? So just I gotta back this up, like pulling back the camera, so to speak. So while we're talking about this, narcissistic fuel and like performing and stuff like that, I'm observing myself in this show and thinking about our show and how it will be received and whether I'm sucking or not in real time. I'm like, am I being funny enough? Am I talking
so,
over it? Was that just psychobabble
so on
BS?
this, what we can say is that on this show, we're not just going to talk about it. We're going to go through the experience
That's
while we're
right.
talking about
We're
it.
gonna we're gonna crunch through it, man. You know what I mean? Like, and there's no way. The other thing I was gonna say is kind of similar to what I said last time about like, oh man, you said some things that really stuck with me last time. Two winners were, but anyway, that's another aside. Stay focused. And I almost referred to myself in the third person just then. Stay focused, Hans. Uh, you know, that like it's worth it to me personally to have a high and I'm willing to pay for the lows emotionally. Right. And you said, well, according to the Tao, that means you're not going to live as long. That stuck with little Hans. I'm like, great. I'm probably going to die tomorrow. Like I've done enough of that. Then I'm like, I'm really toast. But then the other thing is like, it feels so good to get a genuine compliment. In what universe is that not healthy? In what form, when someone's like, oh man, that was incredible, it's like that's such a good song, or like they cry or they're just moved, or you say something, and this happens to my patients all the time. You know how many times a day or week I get gassed up by someone telling me that I'm the second coming and helping them so essentially and change their life. How intoxicating that is. Like, it's ridiculous. It took me like the weird thing is that I've learned not to get off on that so much, but that's bumming me out. Like, I'm a little more burned out and in the doldrums of my career life because I no longer believe that I actually will publish a seminal psychological work. And that, yeah.
Well, don't get ahead of yourself.
Yeah.
You're,
Yeah. Yeah.
but I think the operative word there is genuine, the genuine compliment, right?
Mm,
Because narcissistic supply will feed on any kind of thing that resembles a compliment. And
sure.
that's why celebrities adore adulation, even though they probably know that half of it is bullshit. People just want a piece of them. So in this case, the thing that's really interesting is that it's such a natural response. If someone is genuinely showing appreciation towards you, it immediately gives you this feeling of empowerment.
It's
And
good. Why is that bad?
why is that bad? The only thing that's bad is the stuff that flows from it, consequent to it. If you elaborate upon it in your mind and you start to think you're the second coming,
Right. Right. Right.
that's where the danger really lies. But in just simple appreciation of the energy that you're being given, and you could think of that as God's reward for having done good, and leaving it at that, and not trying to tell yourself a story about what it signifies about your greatness or how
Mm-hmm.
it erases all of your defects. You know, it's just that simple. Like, someone has given me a gift of this good feeling of energy because of what I've done for them. And that is something beautiful, and I appreciate it. And it doesn't mean anything more than that because it could all be erased tomorrow by the shitty stuff I'm about to do.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Or my inherent emptiness, my
Yeah, I
inherent.
shouldn't have said it that way, but it was too funny to not say it
Yeah,
that way.
yeah. No, I love that. Yeah, it does make you sound nefarious, but it's
Right?
true.
Yeah.
Like
Let
it's
me just
so hard.
clarify. That is not what I'm recommending,
Yes,
or
exactly. Of
even
course. Yeah.
hopefully that's not what I'm going to the way I'm going to behave
No,
from
I don't think you
henceforth.
will. I don't think you
Okay.
will. I
Well, thank you. That makes me feel good.
Yeah, yeah. I think too, like it kind of goes. How do you? It's the fact that you take. You're so right. What happens afterward is that you take it, and it. What, in my experience, I could speak for myself again. Like I get on rolls, or like a roll, roll, right? I get on a roll of goodness, of like, okay, so there's no bottom to the bucket, but the hole gets smaller. I make a pretty solid repair. Let's be clear. Is that a repair? Or is it just that I was given some delicious narcissistic fuel that was sort of indisputably uh, contrary to what I think blows about myself, right? And
Mm.
so the bucket now isn't just a tube with no bottom. It's just a bucket with a few holes in it. So the water of good feeling about myself takes longer to drain. And I'll get on a
Um,
roll. And then I can build on it and I can start to self-generate some, right?
I'm seeing the virtues of your metaphor now. So in a way, like every time you feel that there's that fullness of the supply, the question is, well, have I actually stopped the leak? Or is it just that I'm getting more so that it seems like the leaks aren't there temporarily,
Yes,
right?
that's right. That's right.
Yeah, but it's still all of that is kind of focusing on the supply as the desired result.
That's right. Well, what it is we need proof, right? Just like in obsessive anxiety, I'm gonna I the proverbial I is I'm gonna freak out that I that the house is on fire because now that I'm at the movie theater, I can't prove that my checking of the stove and electrical appliances was adequate. I can't prove, I'm not standing there. I can't prove the place isn't on fire, right?
Right.
Obsessive anxiety seeks proof. In fact, it's really put this in your pipe and smoke it. It's sort of a machine that scans your psychological environment for things that are scarily not easy to prove that they're not scary, if that made any damn sense. It looks for things like pain in foot equals cancer, right? And
Right.
boy, is that tough to disprove. And boy, does logic and reason not help. Let me just tell you. Okay, brother, you can just kill yourself. You can use all the CBT freaking worksheets you want, and you're not going to get anywhere. The only thing that helps folks like that, honestly, is love and support because they're going to
Mm.
suffer. It's like hanging out with someone with a stomach bug. You're just going to have to see this through, bud, and it's going to wear off eventually. And then there'll be another one. So similarly, that Jones for narcissistic fuel, it needs proof of our legitimacy, of our worthiness, of some, and the specialness thing is like, at least me, like at my core, I don't want to be famous. I just think I do.
Mhm.
Like, what the fletch is that? You know?
Yeah, I've come to the conclusion a long time ago that I don't want to be famous. I just want to make a living.
Right. Yeah, I definitely want money. Money is good.
I mean, just enough. I don't care about that much. It just enough would be
Yeah.
great.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, it really would. It really would.
you know, the thing about the provability
Mm,
is that in the example you gave, you're not at home, right? And so there's no way of being able to prove it unless you go there.
that's right.
And so If that's what you need, then you have to go there. You
Right.
know, when it comes to all these things about ourselves, there's no way to go there. You can't get there.
That's right.
There's no place where you can be certain of what your significance is in the world, right?
No.
And so you don't really need it. You just want it. You want it desperately. There's no such thing as a need that cannot be gotten. A need is something that's absolutely necessary. It has to be there in order for it to be necessary.
Or you'll be dead. Amen.
Yeah, it's
Right.
a need. Air, water,
Sure.
right?
Dig it. Yeah.
So it's a want. It's a desire. It's a strong desire, and it's a desire that comes from dis-ease. And again, we're back to the same situation. We described our relatively similar background in terms of we were fortunate, but it was kind of a miserable situation. There are so many people who had way less fortunate circumstances and way more miserable
My
circumstances
Lord. Yeah. Totally.
with that they had to deal with from a very, very small age, if not the beginning. That's growing up in a state of disease. You're just, that's what you were planted in. You were planted in a horrible situation. And so the the solution that you described, which is one of love and connection and nurturing and the kind of the bonds that are hold society together, really, that that the potential for that has been just damaged, and for a lot of people, I think it's been impossible for them to establish the kind of bonds that would allow for this thing that they were missing to even begin, you know?
Yeah. It really is a Beatles-esque situation where love is so essential for us as creatures. Like just because there's no changing trauma, you can't untrauma somebody. It's just their lives were terrible. Things. I mean, the things that I hear, I won't even tell my supervisor or mentors some of the details I've heard because it's just so unbelievable. And I don't even want to go to that vibe here now. But suffice to say that being validated and cared for and some form of love coming down the pike is just medicine, man. And it's so that's a fuel that is indisputably good, I
Yeah.
guess. Right? Indisputably good. And care, you know?
That gets us to the second topic that we discussed, because the thing that concerns me so much right now is that it's been clear for, I think, many administrations that our leadership really just don't care about the fate of the people. And I'm deeply concerned about how that's going to play itself out, because the fact of the matter is that social stability is necessary in order for all the good things in life to flourish. And I think that we're seeing a radical instability starting to spread across the world. Well, it's starting. I mean, it really has been going on for quite a while. It's been going on for as long as we've been alive, really.
Does that make
Uh,
it less scary for you that it's like I do that a lot? I'm like, well, it's not the Bay of Pigs. That was scary. I'm not hiding under a desk in some nuclear drill in the 50s, you know? Like,
yeah, I think that that was in some way it felt more real,
mm,
and everything has been kind of virtualized now, and nothing is clear, So Bay of Pigs was, yeah, everyone knew, or at least we all thought we knew, that the Russians had missiles in Cuba. But
yeah.
now there's all kinds of things happening, and no one is really clear. Like you listen to some of the experts and they're just all saying different stuff. Like no one really knows what's going on. But you know that the potentials are enormous.
You
So
did- I have to. So this is part of little Hans's role, right? Is that one of the differences between us, man, and I've always loved this difference, or let me say I've always appreciated. Sometimes it's caused me to feel a little shame about myself that I'm not, anyway, won't go into that. But the one of the differences between us is that you will not shy away from serious matters, and you are very willing to use your powerful brain apparatus and heart apparatuses to delve into serious matters, and I think part of my role is to um,
Try to stop me.
yeah, or counteract you with some buffoonery. Like the first thing that came into my mind, but it's not buffoonery. But in other words, like I think we complement each other in that way. The first thing I thought of when you said that, and I remember so many years of hanging out with you in your apartment with your Bazenji, trotting around. You can hear it. I can hear his nails on the apartment floor, and just sort of kind of, but what about sugar? And what about bikinis? What about, like I'm gonna watch a show tonight and eat a cheeseburger, like this sort of, which kind of makes it sound cheap, but I think I'm scared, and I think that the world, the sober world of reality, I've always just retained a childish need to escape from it,
Yeah. It's
and
understandable. I mean, I've got a cohort of friends who call me Dr. Killjoy, and
yeah,
I've been literally forbidden from discussing certain subjects with them.
yeah.
They're like, you can go talk to this other guy who will be with us, but you can't talk to us about this
About
stuff.
that, right?
Yeah.
We brought a good friend to
They
the
set
party.
they set rules up.
Yeah.
So I understand that, I think there's certain members of my family now who really don't want to talk to me anymore. Um, it's,
Man,
it's a hazard.
but you're also blowing the whistle on something real, or not even, that's not the right way to put it. You're talking about something very real, and you're not doing it to be a buzzkill. You're scared too, and you love people, and you love planet
Yeah.
Earth, and you don't want it to sink into some horrible place. This kind of brings us to the apocalypse thing. I also, in addition to sort of childishness, I have a let me first go back a couple clicks to when you said, I feel like all the experts are saying something different. You reminded me of an occurrence with my dad, who is a risk averse person and who does not like flying or anything where his life is in someone else's hands in a risky way, particularly if it is above the ground. And we were on a roller coaster one time.
He's okay with subways?
I guess so. We were on a roller coaster one time that went up its roller coaster hill, and it had sort of a janky feel to it. It was like kind of clunky. And we got to the crest of the hill, and there was like a little kind of technically oriented booth, is what I would call it, like on stilts right next to the crest of this rise in the roller coaster. And the roller coaster came to a rather clanky stop right at the top, right?
Huh.
And there happened to be a dude in the booth who looked official. He had like some sort of vest on that said he works there. And my dad turned to him and said, because our car was literally right next to the window of the booth, and he looked at him and he just said in a nervous voice, this is a very powerful man in the rest of the world, but he was very decidedly not so powerful at this moment and vulnerable as hell. And he looked at him, he said, so how we doing? He just needed an authority to say, those clunks are normal. You're not going to die, sir. It will go down and you will get off the ride and go home. So how are we doing? How are we doing?
Okay, yeah. I mean, risk averse, one would hope that that would make one interested in examining all the risks. But as you've described, I think there's a very natural human instinct to simply not want to think about the worst of the risks, particularly if it seems like they're outside of our hands.
Yeah.
And I think that's reasonable on a certain level, but also, unfortunately, we've been placed into a society where we've been told that the fate of our society is in our hands. Everyone has accepted the idea that this is supposedly a democracy,
Mm-hmm.
and that the decisions that the electorate make are extremely significant. Now, that may not be true, but that is the reigning narrative. That's what we're all supposed to believe. And indeed, a lot of people still act as if that was true, And some of
Hmm.
those people are unwilling to examine the safety of this ride, right? So
Yeah.
I think that we're asking for it if we don't examine these things, and yet I think there are still relatively few who are willing to. I mean, honestly, the deeper you look into it, the worse it gets.
Let me ask you this. So, why, or rather, let me start again. There are a lot of smart people, and you don't even really have to be terribly smart to qualify for what I'm about to describe. Why is it that people in power collectively or individually make, if they have enough power to do it individually, will make decisions that seem to contradict their well-being too? That's the part that really confuses me. I really don't think that there is a fully ready to go Shangri-La planet elsewhere that all the Illuminati are chilling out in, right? And so they don't need to worry about trashing this place or abusing the people or all of it, right? All their decisions will lead to their apocalypse too, or their
Yeah.
disaster as well. Why don't what is this blindness? Is it a blindness, or do they know something we don't?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a number of things at play. I think that it's quite possible that for some of them, they have looked at the data and they've come to conclude that it's hopeless. And, you know, you could say that that is actually precisely what Elon Musk said with respect to his trip to Mars. He said that things are here on Earth are beyond our ability to fix them. And so we have to become an interplanetary species. So that's the view of some. I think that for others, they've taken a Faustian bargain. They
Mm-hmm.
wanted power
Mm-hmm.
and they did things that you're not supposed to do in order to get it.
Mm-hmm.
And consequently, their decisions are not their own. They are
Mm-hmm.
simply agents of some other power.
Mm-hmm.
And I do believe that there is a malevolent force. You could call it the devil, whatever you want. Some people call it Ahriman.
That's
Uh,
right. The anthros
that,
call it that.
yep,
Ahriman. Yeah.
yeah. I think
Boy.
yeah, that's part of where I got. You know, the guy I started the other podcast, Assembly of Silence. Little plug there. He's a big anthroposophical guy.
Yeah. Yeah. There's some really cool stuff I got to send you about that that's actually pretty hopeful.
Yeah, I mean,
And
I think in some respects, as the story gets played out, there are dimensions that could be very hopeful.
that's
Absolutely.
right. Yeah.
But yeah, just to finish that off, I think
Hmm.
that some people really are kind of possessed, whether by, let's say, blackmail or by some. I mean, I've been thinking recently that it's reasonable to think of humanity as being comprised of two different species when it comes to the way the mind thinks. There are those who aspire to power and don't care about consequences. They just want to be in that position of like a total rock star or as close to that total rock star as they can get. And that
Hmm.
is the idea of success that they have,
Hmm.
and damn the torpedoes, whatever the consequences are,
Hmm.
some are willing to go further than others, right? And on the other hand, you have human beings who don't want any of that, are really interested in love. Really, I think it comes down to love and power, and so the behavior of these two different subsets of humanity is radically different, and
Hmm.
you can't really treat them as the same psychology. The motivations are entirely different, and of
Hmm.
course, this is again kind of a useful model, and there are some people who are trying to straddle both. I think the extent to which you try to straddle both is the extent to which you're unsuccessful in both.
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
but
Do you go ahead. Go ahead.
but yeah, I mean, I think that th- there's a lot of tension in our society because we have um, aspirations to greatness. That's one of the things about kind of the Western ideal is that we're going to be
Mhm.
outstanding. We're going
Yes.
to have
Clever.
all of these incredible accomplishments. And so to have ambition is good,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, totally. Oh man.
But that's what leads towards that, the degradation of the social fabric. really is what
And
you're talking about.
and yet we were built that way. We were built that way. We were built
Well,
to want Mr. Clever. We figure stuff out, the Promethean gift, the whole 9 yards, like you could argue,
Well, it's worse
yeah,
than that because we were forced to become that way on the basis of the success of our previous generations who had learned how to create abundance from the land. And we had these populations that came into contact with each other and they started
totally,
fighting over it. And so
totally.
then you had the ones who had the technological edge, the superior technology would dominate the other ones. And so it became a matter of survival to be excellent, you know?
Right. Yeah.
So it's
Yeah.
all like a natural, and this is where I think we can relieve ourselves from the psychological burden of all this and see it as these are forces of nature. We're subject to the conditions of the lives that of all of the creatures around us, and
That's
human
right.
beings have an inordinate impact upon our own species
Yeah.
because of our success.
Yeah.
That's why
Yeah.
when the historians refer to civilizations that were successful, I see that as actually excessful. Successful would be unnoticed. Successful would be something that would fit in so nicely to the biosphere, so nicely in relationship with all of the other organisms that it would essentially be unrecognizable.
Like a good bass player.
Exactly.
Right? Like I was, damn it. Right? Like you just if you notice me, I'm screwing up. If you don't,
Yeah.
I'm right where I need to be, baby.
And who screwed up the base world more than anyone else?
I don't know. I'm too scared to answer it. I'll answer wrong. Boom.
Jaco Pastorius, man,
I
he
knew you were
became the
gonna
rock
say that.
star.
Oh, that poor guy. Come on, man.
No, he was great. Don't get
He
me
was great.
wrong. I love
Yeah,
him. I
I
actually
know.
really love his music.
Yeah.
But come on,
You
let's
remember
be
that Joni
real.
Mitchell song he does, the Coyote song with Joni Mitchell? That's such a gorgeous song, and his
It
bass
is.
playing makes that song so beautiful and moody and airy.
It's
What a
true.
gorgeous tune. But wait, going
There's a
back.
guy who could straddle worlds.
Yeah, right. Oh well, and look how he died. That the tragedy of how that man died and this is something I heard. I don't know. I hear a lot of things, and then I kind of embellish them in my head. Who knows? But he died rather tragically. But anyway, speaking of embellishing, my take on poor Faust is a little different, and it's also true. Like this connects to two quick thoughts here. We got like 10 minutes, and then in my obnoxious therapist speak, we'll have to round off. Um, so, which I stole from my ex therapist.
It's a good one. It's better than a hard cut.
Yeah, 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 and it's really, yeah. He said it in a Scottish. He's like, we'll have to round off. Now I was always had this pang of
Oh, dude, you
resentment.
just screwed up. I have to bleep it out.
Son of a. All right. Well, we'll
Note to
just leave that
self.
one thing out. Note to self: stop saying your name. Damn it. All right. So, but just to go back, I think that is it possible? Maybe this is a question we can have for next time too. Is like how much is the desire for power at the expense of love or humanity? How much of it is an inherent primordial resentment for freezing your ass off and starving to death before you knew how to make fire? How much in some collective unconscious reality did we build some kind of chip on our shoulder about the inherent hardship of being human? And that chip turns into an overcompensation, right? Like you see this all the time with people who got rich, and they got rich because of a nitrous fuel level motivation because they grew up so poor, and they become like, oh, I'll never worry about money again, and they become like a billionaire. And so they don't need all that, right? All they needed was some millions relatively, but they just go so
Well,
hard. Is that partly in some ways what we're seeing? I want to believe that we're not, that this isn't just good and evil, that there's just that
well, we,
somewhere inside every cavity of a person, there's some really good stuff. It's just been twisted or forgotten or calcified.
I think you're pointing to something that's really important here, and I would just clean it up a little bit by saying uh, I don't think that we personalized it as much back in the day where we were just struggling with the natural world.
Mhm.
My sense is that you could say we blame it on God, but on the other hand, because God is providing everything to begin with, that's a very risky thing to do, and so you'd be very careful about being angry, you
Mhm.
know, and you would say, well, in a certain sense, this is testing our strength, which literally it is.
Mhm.
That's what hardship does.
Right.
I think that the anger and the resentment and the uh, let's say demonic fury is a result of the conditions that were created by human beings on other human beings. So
Right.
people who were forced to live in slavery or whose nations had been destroyed by other nations or who lived in neighborhoods where there had been some kind of, let's say, um, uh, program to destroy that society, like MK Ultra, or the one that they ran against the black communities back in the '60s to try.
Mhm.
The FBI and the CIA just destroyed those communities. I'm trying to remember the name of the program right now, but it's not coming to mind. Um, at any
Yep.
rate, when you grow up under harsh circumstances, I think you do develop a kind of a hatred of, certainly whoever it is who you see as being responsible for you having ended up there, but perhaps also in a certain sense for humanity itself, because you're just exposed to the worst aspects of it, and you just see this, and you not only do you see the horrible nature in the basement of humanity, but you also have disdain for the people who didn't experience that and who believe in all the good things.
Hmm. Or the
So
people who made you feel really bad and scared in the first place. Like
yeah, but I
maybe
think
on,
that folded into that too, you have all the people who had nothing to do with it whatsoever, except that they didn't have the misfortune of being in the circumstance that you had been.
that's right. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I mean, well, and is it
And this
also
gets
just
back to just one more thing I'll say
yeah,
about
yeah,
it is
yeah.
that
Yeah, yeah.
originally the
Uh,
words good and evil, like if you go back and look at the way that those words were used in the Torah, for example, they didn't mean what we think of as good and evil today. They were basically like good was the stuff that you like. It was what you wanted, and bad. It's tov and ra, if I remember correctly, and ra is bad, evil.
mhm.
Um, that's just what you don't want. It doesn't have an intention associated with it. It's
I
not
see.
like
Right, right.
necessarily malevolent. It's just the stuff you don't want to experience,
Yeah, right, right.
And so that kind of suggests that like natural state where primarily you're dealing with forces outside of your control that had nothing to do with the actions of human beings. But over the course of the history of civilization, that has changed radically. And now I would say that people are suffering far more as a consequence of the designs of humanity than from natural disaster, although there's quite a lot of natural disaster going on too.
Yeah,
Supposedly
it's
natural.
debatable.
I mean, maybe it isn't, Some people think that some of it is human design as well.
That's right.
So
That's right. And
so yeah, but obviously that really does make it look like malevolence when your own species is doing it to you. And so that's how you have the more kind of contemporary concept of what good and evil signify.
well, and we're assigning meaning. It's malevolence versus malevolence. Who's doing what? Right? It's you just right. I mean, if literally, man, we could get in a car if we were near each other and drive down to another neighborhood or a different, and we'd go to two different houses, and each house would say those guys are freaking evil. And then the
Yeah.
other house would say those guys, and they would be very at their core convinced of this, right? Here, but here's just to back up again, and we will have to round off. Is it is uh it's almost like a hatred of fear itself. And interestingly, I said this is very interesting, and I'm not trying to be shrinky, but I said develop a chip on your shoulder about being in hardship. You said develop a chip on your shoulder or a hatred or an anger at rather God. And I think that's really, really interesting because I think in of that is a whole subject is when someone was experiencing the lack of warmth or hunger back in the day or even whenever, but especially back in the day because of the stark inescapability of it. There's, would they, out of fear and desperation, believe in a higher power and ask it for help, ask it for relief, for safety, right? And would they imbue objects, weather, animals, archetypes with this power so that they felt less alone and terrified, right? Or would they rage at it because you're doing this to me? I'm cursed. Was it a Job experience? It's pretty interesting inquiry there.
I think it's difficult to put ourselves into the state of mind of the people, let's say kind of a prehistory group of
Yeah.
people who are really fully embedded in the natural world.
Yeah.
And yet at the same time, I think we can imagine that anything which has uh, a non-negotiable influence over you can be seen as a god.
Right. And you can fear it.
Yeah,
Right.
of course,
It's so
right?
true.
And
Yeah.
it says in the Bible, fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge.
Right. Yeah. And
I mean, the
there you go.
beginning of
There's Mr.
wisdom.
Clever. I mean, there's Mr. Clever right there. We're pretty, in some ways, there's an innocence to this whole thing. I don't like being cold. I don't like being hungry. And I don't like getting attacked by those other apes. And they're stealing my stuff, my food. And they took my girl. You're bumming. And so I'm going to figure out a way to defend this cave, to make bigger fire and bonk more animals. So I'm well fed. All right. We got to
All
round off.
right, rounding it off. That was
Yeah.
great.
That was great. And,
Yeah,
and
man.
blip me out. Blip me out.
I will blip you out. All right, so blipping out for now, returning again in a few weeks for number 3.
I would love that. Goodbye for now, sir.
Okay, adios, take care.
All right. Bye.